Good morning. This is Debbie Gilmer again, and welcome to the webinar number 7, our seventh and final webinar for the 2014-15 project year. It's my pleasure to be here and introducing David DuBay this morning. Lisa Sturdivant and Letitia Hutman are not with us this morning. They are down in Portland at a USBLN meeting. We're joined here in the room today by Linda McDonald from SAMS and the fabulous Julia Mason, with whom we would not be doing webinars. So thank you once again, Julia. It's my pleasure to welcome David. David is a CWIC, has worked at Maine Med as a CWIC, Community Work Incentives Coordinator, since 2008, and just has a brilliant mind around all of this stuff, and looking forward to a fabulous presentation. I'm going to turn it over to David. While David's presenting, if you would put your questions in the chat room, I will be monitoring those. We may hold some of them until the end, but if you do have a question about a specific topic that's more immediate, again, put them in the chat room as we go along, and I'll send them on to David as we go along. Here you go, David. Thanks.
Thanks. So I'm David DuBay, and I'm the CWIC, the benefit specialist at Maine Medical Center. And I cover the Augusta, Midcoast, and Aroostook areas, and we have 4 other people who cover other parts of the state. It's kind of broken up by population, so some people have bigger territories geographically, but we all have the same basic population that we're working with. So what we'll be talking about today is maximizing potential regarding SSI and SSDI, and specifically the focus is around turning the question around. So going from how many hours can I work to how much money do I want. And I think by way of introduction, I just want to explain a little bit about what we do at Maine Med. And essentially what that is just looking at people's benefits, their SSI, SSDI, and Maine Care, food stamps, Medicare, and what's going to happen to those benefits when they start working. So the title CWIC actually stands for Community Work Incentives Coordinator, work incentives being those rules that Social Security has set up and the Maine Care has set up that enable people to work. And I think the first thing that I want to do is just to get a sense of who you all are. So we have, I think there are 5 questions that we'll be asking throughout the presentation. And the first question is just, what is your role and job title? Take a few seconds here to let you all those.
When you want me to change the slide, next or indicate to change?
Okay. Yeah, we'll pick up with
Looks like an interesting mix, David,
yeah,
of employment specialists, VR counselors, case managers.
So first, what I want to do is just talk a little bit about who qualifies for our services. And so we're on slide 5 at this point. So we can work with anyone who is at least 14, but under retirement age. They have to be currently receiving SSI or SSDI and then they have to be interested in working, or perhaps they are working, or they're looking at some kind of change. Maybe their boss has offered them a raise or more hours, or they want to start a business. So we can sit down with folks like that and talk with them about what's going to happen. So the basic process, and this is slide 6, is that there's a referral packet that people need to fill out, and what that does is just give us some basic information. There are some release forms in there too. There are 2 that are for Social Security, and we use that to generate a report about someone's benefits, and that gives us a lot of details that people wouldn't just know off the top of their heads, like when is the next medical review going to be, what kind of work earnings have been developed if they've worked in the past and mailed in pay stubs, things like that. There's also a Voc Rehab release form, and so if someone's not connected with Voc Rehab, they don't have to fill out that form, but if they are, that's really handy because sometimes Voc Rehab counselors will have questions for us before we're able to schedule a meeting, or sometimes we schedule through the Voc Rehab counselor if that person wants to be there. And then what will happen is once we get the releases, we run that report from Social Security. Lately, what we've been doing is for some folks, just calling them by phone to see if we can answer some of their initial questions by phone. That allows us to reach a greater number of people, and some folks just have some basic questions and they don't really want to have an in-person meeting. But based on that conversation, if it appears that the questions are more in-depth, that's when we'll go ahead and schedule that in-person meeting. I should mention too, on the slide on your screen, the phone number is correct, but when I sent out the slides, I realized that I hadn't corrected the phone number. So
I noted that in the chat room.
Yeah. So, and there's also the website below that, so you can download our referral packet off that, and also all of our fact sheets about trial work period and Maine care, all that stuff is on that, as well as a brand new fact sheet that we just developed about transition age youth. So we're going to go to the next question before I kind of launch right into SSI and SSDI. I just want to get a sense of how well that you feel that you understand the difference between SSI and SSDI. So we'll take a few seconds for that. So it seems like it's a pretty even mix, really, between folks who have a pretty good understanding of the difference and folks who have somewhat of an understanding. So what I want to do is just to give a brief background on these 2 different programs. This will help provide some context for when we get to the part about turning that question around to how much money do you want to make per month, as to why we look at that differently depending upon whether someone is getting SSI or SSDI. So we're on slide 8 right now, and so with SSDI, this is Social Security Disability Insurance, and that's based on a person's work history. So when you work, you pay taxes, you earn quarters, and based on those quarters, they might give you a certain benefit amount. That can vary depending upon how much you've paid into the system. Some folks haven't paid enough into the system to qualify for SSDI, so they get a supplemental benefit instead, or SSI, the Supplemental Security Income. And so this pays $733 a month maximum if you're single, and if you're a couple, it's $1,100. That's combined, so each person gets a check for $550. And one key way of telling the difference between these two is, SSI always arrives on the first of the month. So someone says, yeah, on April 1st I got $733. That sounds like SSI. If their check comes later in the month, sometimes it's the third, sometimes it's later on, and it can be different amounts, then we're probably dealing with SSDI at that point. But I'm always very careful about giving someone specific benefit advice until I know which benefit that they're getting, and a lot of folks are not always clear on that. So if someone says, oh, I'm getting Social Security disability, be careful. They might be getting SSI, and they might not be clear on what the difference is. And very briefly, in terms of work incentives, Social Security disability, the SSDI benefit, this is the one where people have that 9-month trial work period where they can make anything. And then their check continues after that if their gross pay is below $1,090 a month. On the other hand, SSI has a completely different philosophy. This benefit is the one where they reduce the check $1 for every $2 that someone makes. So in terms of what work incentives are available and what we want to look at in terms of the budget, these are two very different things. And I think part of what we'll do is we'll tackle the SSI end of things first. But before we do that, I wanted to go to question 3, and this is just to find out whether that brief explanation was helpful. So do you feel like you have a better understanding of the difference between these benefits? And we'll take a few seconds for that. Good, yeah. So just kind of looking at some of the results here, it sounds like that was helpful to you all. So that is good to hear. So I think one thing that I want to do before I kind of look at the most common question, which is how many hours can I work without it affecting my benefits, is address briefly the second most common question. So this is on slide 10. And the second most common question that I get is, can I keep my medical insurance? Mostly the answer is yes. So Medicare continues for several years after the trial work period, even if someone is making enough that their SSDI check stops. Maine Care, if you have SSI, Maine Care is automatic, and the annual income limit is $32,784 a year. And that's kind of based on the estate estimates how much you would have to make to replace that Maine Care benefit if you were paying for insurance through your employer. With SSDI, it's a little more complicated. It's based on income, but most people can keep Maine Care when they're working, and for a lot of folks, even if they're working full-time. One point of caution that I'll add is that there are some folks who are getting Maine Care because they have children, so they're getting Maine Care as a family, or it's now called MAGI, M-A-G-I, and so that requires a much more individual calculation. So moving on to slide 11. So the most common question, how many hours can I work without it affecting my benefits? So this is what people ask all the time. And so what we'll be talking about is how we can turn that question around. And our second to last question is number 4, so we're just going to go to that right now. And I just want to get a sense of, have you ever asked someone how many hours, I think I read the question wrong, have you ever asked how many hours a person can work without it affecting their benefits? And we'll take a few seconds to do that.
always know. It just depends on what.
So it seems like most of us have, and I'm certainly one of those folks. That's I think when I started this job 7 years ago, that was the primary focus that I had, having come into this from case management, and then just kind of learning more about work incentives and seeing in practice, meeting with folks, how things actually work. I began to realize that that there's probably a better way of looking at that, a way that can help people, with maximizing their potential. So when it comes to this question about how many hours someone can work before it affects their benefits, the short answer here is that Social Security counts dollars, not hours. So how many hours can vary quite a bit depending upon what type of job someone is looking for. Now, SSI doesn't count the first $85 or $65 per month. But of course, if you're only making $85 a month, that's not really a whole lot. That doesn't represent a significant increase in your income. So the longer answer, slide 14. The longer answer is that working more means more money. And on the next slide, there's a graph that just sort of illustrates visually how that works. So what we're looking at here, the one on your left, the dark blue is SSI, the light blue is the food stamps. So that shows how much money someone has, and you can kind of think of food stamps as money, how much money that they have per month when they're not working. The one in the middle shows what happens if you're making $85 a month. So you can see the food stamps, the SSI are not being affected. The person's income is $85 higher, which is something, but not much. The one on the right is if someone is making $885 a month. So here, you can see how much taller that one is. This person has significantly more income per month when they're making $885, even though their SSI and their food stamps are lower. And this is important because I think a lot of folks really kind of get focused on, well, they're going to cut my SSI, I'm going to have less money. And for most people, that is not the case, as this graph here illustrates. So what we want to do, this is slide 16, is to turn the question around. If someone says, well, how many hours can I work? Well, the question is, how much money do I want to have each month? So what we want to do here is to focus on opportunities and not limitations. So saying, well, I can only work 20 hours, which is something common that we hear, even though there's never actually been a 20-hour rule. That's focusing on, in some ways, it's focusing on what you can't do. I can't work more than so many hours per week. But maybe someone can work more than that, and perhaps that will help them increase their standard of living, help bring them out of poverty. Now, when I ask people that question, how much money do you want to have each month, the most common response that I get on slide 17 is, I don't know. And so what can be helpful is to work with folks to help clarify that question. And some folks, too, if they're looking for a job goal, sometimes they're not quite sure what they want to do or what they can do. And sometimes kind of looking at, well, how much money do you want to have can help steer them in that direction of, well, this is the type of job that could earn that sort of income. So a good starting point is to talk about, well, how much is your rent per month? What are your utilities? What do you spend on food, transportation, other expenses that you might have? And also, how might your expenses change? So if you start working, then you might think, well, maybe I could get a better apartment. Maybe I don't have a car, but I could use one, certainly. So if I start working, maybe I could buy a car. But what kind of budget do I need to have that? So once we settle on a dollar amount, then we can kind of go back from there and figure out where we need to go. So the last question is question number 5. So we just want to look at how often do you look at a person's budget when developing a job goal? So we'll take a few seconds. Okay, so it looks like there are answers in every category here, but the most answers are frequently, so that is great to see.
I don't know if this is a good time. We have a question about if people earn more money, aren't they losing money to taxes? Do the taxes that people are paying when they earn more money reducing their benefits?
So the taxes that someone pays, of course, everyone's tax situation is different. A lot of folks can qualify for the earned income tax credit when they've been working. So they'll be able to get what they paid back and then some. Other folks, especially if somebody owns a home, they might find that when they file taxes, they can itemize certain things they weren't counting before. And so, people are oftentimes concerned about what their taxes will be. Unfortunately, that's something I can't really estimate just because everyone's tax situation is so different. But I always do mention the earned income tax credit when someone brings that up. So,
thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So once we've established a certain dollar amount that somebody wants to make, they want to know, well, but seriously, how many hours can I work? Because it really always sort of comes back to that question. And of course, an answer that I give a lot is, well, it depends. And the reason is, of course, that the hourly rate can have a big impact on how many hours per week will get you to that goal. So the example up here is, let's say somebody's decided that, okay, I need to make about $1,200 a month to have to be able to pay the rent and do everything else that I need to do. And so what I would then do is just kind of do the SSI calculation backwards and figure out, well, that if someone earned $885 a month, their SSI check would be $333. And so then that combination would give them $1,218. And of course, too, at that level, they'd probably be getting some food stamps, maybe not a lot, but and if someone was concerned about taxes, then based on what they think their tax situation might be, perhaps we could add a little bit. Instead of $1,200, we might say $1,300 or what have you, if we needed to do that. So if we said, okay, earning $885 a month will give you that $1,200 income once we consider the SSI check. So how many hours they need to work? Well, if they were making minimum wage, that's $7.50 an hour, they would need to work 28 hours a week to get there. If they had a better paying job at $10 an hour, it would only take 20 hours a week to get there. And again, this can sometimes help people narrow down a job goal if they don't have one yet. That if they thought, well, I don't know if 28 hours a week will work for me if I can do that, then at least they would have a sense of, well, if I did want to work 20 hours a week, then I know what kind of hourly rate that I'm looking for and what kind of job might pay that. So what I want to do at this point is to kind of shift gears, and we're going to forget about the whole, one for two situation that we have with SSI, and we want to look at SSDI. SSDI is different. It's a very has a very different philosophy. All or nothing benefit. So after the 9-month trial work period, you either get your full SSDI check if your gross pay is under $1,090 a month, or if you're making at least $1,000 or more, then you do not get your SSDI check at all for that month. Of course, next month, if your income is back under, they might give you that check back, since they have that a month-by-month philosophy. But what we still want to do is to focus on opportunity and not limitations. How much money do I want to have each month? And the reason why is that, let's say somebody said, okay, I'm getting $800 SSDI, and it's not enough. I can't pay my bills on this. I need $1,500. So one obvious thing would be to say, well, if you made $700 a month plus your $800 SSDI, that's $1,500 a month. So there you go. On the other hand, we might say to someone, well, let's say that you have a job opportunity where you'll be making $1,500 a month. Well, there's your $1,500 right there. So yes, your SSDI check will stop eventually after that 9-month trial work period. But this actually might be a better situation because there are other work incentives that you can fall back on if it doesn't work out. But also, this job that makes $1,500 a month, as time goes on, there might be other opportunities. There might be pay raises. There might be another job at the same company that you can take that pays better, and then eventually you're making $2,000 a month, and you have more money than you thought you would. So earning over the $1,090 can sometimes be good. It may not be for everyone, but we also want to make sure that we're not just automatically assuming that somebody needs to stay below that $1,090. On the next slide, this addresses some of the things that people can tap into. So if I try, earning over the $1,090, what happens if it doesn't work out? Well, there's a 3-year extended period where I can get my check back. So in April, if I make $1,090 or more, I don't get a check, but in May, if I'm below that, then I can get my check back that month. They just kind of wipe the slate clean on May 1st, and then we go forward from there. This is also why it's really important when folks are working that they're checking in monthly with Social Security, photocopying pay stubs, mailing those in. SSI also has a phone reporting system that folks might be able to use, and that goes directly into the Social Security computer, so that's actually a more efficient way of doing it. One other thing about Social Security disability is that once my 3-year extended period is over, if I'm still earning the $1,090 or more, they will terminate the SSDI at that point, but they will give me an additional 5 years where I can reapply for my SSDI if I need to. And that reapplication process is expedited. It's go to the front of the line, go in there, reapply, and within a month or two, they'll have that check reissued. So really, when you think about it, between 9-month trial work period, 3-year extended period, 5 years to file for the expedited reinstatement, there's almost a decade of safety nets that people have with SSDI. A few other things that people might be able to tap into. The next slide talks about employer subsidy and special conditions. So there are some folks who their gross pay might be over $1,090, but their countable is under $1,090 because they have deductions. And so employer subsidy is when your employer lets you work at a lower productivity. Typically, they're making accommodations for you, but you're getting paid the same. So for example, if they said, I'm doing 90% of what a non-disabled person is doing, then they only count 90% of my income. So if I made $1,100, essentially that ends up being a $110 deduction. The other thing would be special conditions. So let's say I have SSDI, I'm a Voc Rehab client, I have a job coach, and Voc Rehab is paying that job coach. I don't have to worry about it. But the time that the job coach spends with me on the job can be deducted. So if I'm making $10 an hour and the job coach is with me 10 hours a month, then my deduction is $100, even though Voc Rehab is actually paying the bill for the job coach. There are some work incentives that are shared by SSI and SSDI, and the IRWEs, or impairment-related work expenses, are one. So with IRWEs, these can always be used for SSI. So I can take receipts for my out-of-pocket medical expenses, co-pays at the pharmacy, doctor's, counselor. If I have a certified service animal, then the care for that pet. Sometimes transportation. If I can't drive due to my disability, then if I'm paying out of pocket for a cab, that might be an IRWE. I've had clients who are deaf and who use smartphones to communicate with people texting, and so Social Security has counted a portion of that phone bill as an impairment-related work expense. So for SSI, it can lower your countable income. It's not a reimbursement, but it does mean that someone's SSI isn't being reduced as much as it would have been. For SSDI, if I'm over the 1,090, but I have enough out-of-pocket expenses to put me back under, then I will get an SSDI check that month. Folks on SSI and SSDI can also tap into the Plan to Achieve Self-Support, or PASS. And so with PASS, this is, if somebody said, okay, I need to earn, the $1,500 a month, but to do that, there's a certification that I need, and how am I going to pay for that? Or maybe I need to go back to college and finish my degree. So what PASS can do is give you extra money to help achieve that goal. So if I were on SSDI, let's say I was getting $800 of SSDI, I would put most of that aside into a separate bank account that I'm dedicating to PASS. They give me an SSI check on top of that, so I'm getting $733 to pay my rent and so on. But I'm using the almost $800 that I put into my PASS plan to pay tuition, books, or maybe I'm saving up to buy a car. If I have SSI, then let's say that I had a part-time job, they began reducing my SSI, now I have a PASS plan, they don't reduce my SSI anymore. They put it back up to the $733, so I take half of my gross pay from that part-time job, and that's what I'm using to put into the PASS plan. So this is a work incentive that can help get people to that point of, this is how much money that I need to earn. And then I think, finally, there's one other work incentive that I want to talk about. This is slide 24. This is SSI only. It's the student earned income exclusion. And the thing about this is that once you're 22, then you can't use that anymore. But this is great for SSI recipients who are in high school, those who are in college or Job Corps, and again, if they're at least 21 years old or younger, they can essentially work and not have their SSI reduced. So there are limits. It's about $1,780 a month, caps out at a little over $7,000 a year. I've never seen anybody max that out, and people can use this in the summertime. So let's say that I'm in high school and I get a summer job and I'm going back for my junior year, senior year, and I just tell Social Security, look, here's my registration for the fall. I'm working the summer. Don't reduce my SSI. And it's really great to get youth working early on, because they start building those skills right away, and studies have shown that really pays dividends down the road. It gets them into the workforce, and helps them build skills, helps them understand the value of an education. So that's the presentation, and I think there may have been a bunch of questions that have been coming in, and so we're going to take a look at those now.
There are. Your colleague Jen Kimball has been answering some of them as we've gone
Okay.
along, so she's been very helpful. Thank you, Jen. One question that I think Jen deferred to you was a question around, do the rules for SSI apply to disabled adult children?
Yeah, that is a good question. So, and a little bit of background, what this person is asking is, there are some folks who are getting SSI, and then what happens is Social Security says, well, you can get a Social Security disability benefit from a parent's record because your parent is receiving Social Security retirement, or they're getting their own SSDI benefit. And so what this individual is wondering is, well, do the SSI rules still apply? And really the big one is that $2,000 asset limit. So what we've discovered is that with sometimes someone's childhood disability benefit, which is that special kind of SSDI, is over the main care limit. And so what DHS can do is they can make an exception. But the asset limit, the $2,000 asset limit, still applies to that person, so they can keep the main care. Normally, folks with SSDI who are on main care can actually have a bit more. They don't count the first $8,000, and then the asset limit is $2,000 on top of that. So that $8,000 exclusion basically doesn't apply to people with that CDB.
So Marianne asked a follow-up question on that same topic. Most of my disabled adult children get well above the SSI limit. So the question is, are they treated like SSDI rules?
So for the actual Social Security work incentives, they're treated like SSDI. So the main care is the only exception. So the folks with the disabled adult child or childhood disability benefit, they have the 9-month trial work period. They have that 1,090 SGA, as it's called, cap after that.
She asked again, can they make the 1090 per month?
Right. So if they're earning below 1090, they get their full childhood disability benefit.
Okay, let me go back up. Brian asked, I hope I'm not missing anybody, but anyway, I'll start here. On the months that folks are over 1090, do they lose Medicare coverage for those months?
They don't. So with Medicare, once your trial work period ends, Medicare continues for a bunch of years, at least 7 years and 9 months, usually longer, even if you're not getting an SSDI because you're over the 1090.
Jen answered a question. I wanted to point out, to be eligible for PASS, you have to be in an IPE. Jen said no, but that she directed people to the PASS fact sheet, which is a very useful document. So thanks, Jen. The next question, would you review the deduction of job coaching hours to make it crystal clear? This would be a huge help for some of our consumers.
Sure. Yeah, so this is regarding Social Security disability. And one example would be, let's say that I have a job and I'm making $10 an hour. So the job coach is with me on site for 10 hours that month. So my pay rate, $10 an hour, times the 10 hours is $100. So we're not using the job coach's hourly wage. We're using my hourly wage. So they will subtract that $100 from my gross pay. So if I made $1,100, minus 100 is 1,000. So now I'm below that 1,090. So I do get my full SSDI check that month. By the way, if somebody is paying the job coach themselves, then they're pulling cash out of their pocket, handing it to the job coach. At that point, that would become an impairment-related work expense. But normally, it's Voc Rehab that's paying the job coach.
And just to be clear, that was for SSDI folks.
That is for SSDI folks, right? And so that is only an SSDI
Right.
work incentive. SSI folks cannot tap into that.
I wanted to make sure that was clear. Looks like we've got a number of people typing. I have a question that I'll ask while we're waiting for folks to type. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations about how we sort of move from asking how many hours can I work to how much money do I need or want in the person-centered planning process or something? Mm-hmm. That's a very different, fundamentally a very different perspective. Just thoughts about, you know, how you would introduce that to sort of get teams to be thinking in that direction.
Yeah, so when people ask me that question, first I just usually say, well, Social Security doesn't look at hours. So there's actually no way to answer that question anyway, because if I'm an RN making $27 an hour, that's one thing. If I'm making $7.50 an hour, the same number of hours is very different gross pay. So I just tell people, well, they don't look at hours, they're looking at dollars, and most people have more money when they're working. So, and I just ask them straight out, how much money do you want to have each month? And then I just kind of work with them on, you know, what are your expenses if they're not sure.
A couple of other questions. If someone has a job coach with them the entire time they are working, does that mean their income does not count?
So if you're getting SSDI and that job coach is with you all the time, then yeah, that would that person's accountable income theoretically could be zero. I've never seen that, but it could happen.
So Elizabeth, again, that's folks on SSDI only that would relate, and that would be yeah.
Right, and they would still use the trial work period, so that only applies after the 9 months are over.
Doug asks, to be clear, student exemption, employment exemption can be used with high school students on SSI.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it's underutilized. We want to see people using it more.
If someone is working a few hours a week and still has a job coach, should they be deducting the hours that the job coach is with them? People are getting confused about.
Yeah, so what people should do is to have their job coach write a letter at the end of each month that says, I spent so many hours with you this month, and then include that with their pay stubs when they mail those into Social Security.
And again, that's only for folks who are receiving SSDI. The next question from James, does anyone have figures on private pay job coaching rather than VR funding the service?
Yeah, so that I don't.
I'm not sure what James is asking. How many people are using private pay? Or could you clarify your question for us, James? If it's easier, you can take yourself off mute and ask a question on the phone. Do many people privately pay for job coaching? Was the question.
I think not many. I haven't seen that a lot.
Okay. Thanks. Amy says, I've run into this, and the agency stated that they had to charge the same rate for private pay. That's my understanding as well. I do know that there are individuals who pay for their services. And if they're buying the services from an agency, they have to pay what their billable rate is to whichever department. Waiting on questions. Any questions here? Linda.
I find the disconnect, like if I'm going over to, I visit all the social clubs in Region 2 at Maine. When we talk about people going to work, the first and foremost out of their mouth is, I can't work, I will lose my benefits. And then I try to explain, but there's something about the food. They will take my food stamps away. And it's like at that time I lose them. There's no matter what I try to say, it's not what they want to hear. So I'm missing that piece somehow.
Yeah, and that is a big issue. I think there is generally a lot of fear around benefits and just a lot of protectiveness. And part of it, I think, is just telling someone, well, you know, there are work incentives, and if you talk to a CWIC, they can take a look at it. There's no obligation. What I try and do with the slide that we had that had that graph, I have a whole bunch of those that I can individualize for someone's situation, so we can show them visually that they will have more money when they're working.
And that's fine, but I've got to get them to you, and I lose them at that point. So maybe a couple of them call, but the other 50 don't.
Well, and maybe just telling people that there is no obligation. There's no. It's a no pressure meeting. It's confidential, and that we'll just answer the questions that they have. And if there is a situation where, because every once in a while there's someone who, for example, might have SSI food stamps and BRAP, and it could be that, you know, that working, they have to work a lot of hours to kind of get over that hump, and they might lose their BRAP at that point. So that's the situation that I always look out for. But if someone is in a situation like that, we're up front with them about, you know, what their choices are.
You do a presentation at the MAPSAR during the summer, down at the camp, Copsy.
Right.
How many of those do you think would come back or go get a job or ask more questions? Do you think they're interested enough, or they just kind of blow it off?
You know, I actually did get a few referrals from that. And, of course, there may have been other referrals that I didn't know about because you might have gotten routed to the CWIC that covers a different area of the state.
Right. But if I had a magic answer, I would feel, I just feel like I lose so much.
And, you know, part of what we're doing now is when we get a referral is we are calling people to do phone outreach. Not everyone needs an in-person meeting, and it could be that you just tell someone, look, you know, you just sign these releases, and you can just talk to someone on the phone, answer some basic questions. I think for some folks, they might need to kind of take a few small steps to kind of build that confidence. Yeah. Yeah.
Could maybe a CWIC have a presentation at the social clubs?
Yeah. So with the presentations, that's something, you know, that we do quite a bit of, and you know we do go out to the clubhouses I mean, I was just up in Aroostook and did a presentation to the social club at MHC, so definitely.
One of the things that we do know is that there just are a whole lot of misconceptions and myths out there. So we are so fortunate in Maine to have the Maine Med WIPA program and the bright and talented folks that are throughout the state helping. It's an issue that, you know, folks are dealing with across the country. For years, there's just such a misunderstanding about it. And, you know, I think the more we can do presentations like this and get information out, presentations to various groups of folks with disabilities will be helpful. Lynn asked a follow-up question. Do you have to be a certified employment specialist to give the letter that goes with the pay stubs?
So is this question about the having a job posting, getting that deduction? Well, the letter, I mean, it should come from the person, like the actual job coach. That would be ideal, or at least from their agency. I think, barring that, the person could, like the actual beneficiary, could write the letter. But I mean, again, it's ideal if the job coach does it.
So Jen has been responding to a couple of questions from Amy and is asking that you address her question and give some background about QMB and SLMBY. She's got clients who are very concerned about losing QMB, SLMBY, and the allowable income window quite narrow. Now, Jen had noted that this was a weedy question and maybe best talked about offline, but if you could just sort of introduce that.
Well, so briefly, what this is that Medicare, the federal health insurance, costs $105 a month. So MaineCare, the state insurance, has a program to pay that for people. And that's what QMB and SLMB are. And they're just, the difference between those two just depends upon income level. So I think it ends up being an individual calculation because it's complicated. But I think a lot of people actually can work and not have that affected, especially if somebody has full MaineCare as well. That's really a good situation to be in. And one thing that I always tell folks is, even if you know, if they have full MaineCare and they begin working, if they're earning enough that they have to pay the $105 out of pocket, their paycheck is going to be a lot more than $105. So they're still way ahead at that point.
She says that QMB also covers co-pays and deductibles from Medicare.
It does, and so, and the SLNV does not pay that 20% copay that Medicare has. Now, if someone has full MaineCare, it doesn't matter because MaineCare will pick up what Medicare doesn't. So it's a moot point. If someone does not have full MaineCare, that's where it gets more complicated. And I would just have to do an individual look at that point.
Okay. I believe those are the questions. I've got a few announcements. We'll continue to monitor the chat for the next few minutes, but kudos to David and making sense of what can be confusing and just more information we can share with folks, the better. So you have the information on making a referral to a CWIC on slide 6. Note the new telephone number, the corrected telephone number, and David and his colleagues are just great resources. Just a couple of announcements before we log off. Registration is open currently for the May 20th Discovering Personal Genius, which will be held here in Augusta. I think we have about 10 seats left. So if you're interested and need that certification, I suggest you register soon. For everybody, which is about 75 people who are currently certified, we'll have Technical Assistance Day with Patty Cassidy on May 21st. The invite to that went out yesterday. If you're already certified, it's a wonderful opportunity to come, learn from your colleagues, get feedback on your staging record, and support from Patty. The other thing, and I will be making a formal announcement hopefully shortly, but we're working with DHHS and VR on an online employment specialist and, drumroll please, job coach credential that folks have been asking for some time. We're hoping that that training will be available in the next 2 months. It's completely online. It's the College of Employment Support, so folks that are familiar with the College of Direct Supports, it's that platform. And again, we'll be making that formal announcement shortly and be making that available to folks. So that's very exciting. And I think that's all the announcements that I have at the moment.
Evaluation.
Oh, yes. Don't forget to click on evaluation in the web links box and then browse to it to complete today's evaluation. And you have to complete the evaluation to get your certificate of for CEUs. So it looks like lots of thank yous and excellent information.
Thanks.
So thank you, David. Enjoy this interesting spring we're having. And I hope the snow this morning didn't distract you too much. Getting pretty ridiculous, I do believe. Again, thanks very much and enjoy the spring. Thank you.
Thank you.